This begins our segment on the dairy industry, on safe handling of animals in a dairy situation. This is a relatively large dairy here in the San Joaquin Valley. Like most dairies, they practice both artificial insemination, but occasionally have what they call cleanup bulls to be worked. Immediately behind me are a collection of Holstein bulls, which they use to settle some of the cows that are here on the dairy. What's probably significant is if you take a look there, the bull that's immediately on a profile behind me is doing what we call posturing, in which case he gives a side view, he puts his head down, he paws the ground, and all those are in general somewhat aggressive behaviors and kind of a warning for the person that's around him. We have a real high incidence of injuries or potential for injuries in the dairy industry by bulls, probably more so than we do on beef cattle. And it's kind of an example of familiarity breeds contempt, because they've been around people. There is no natural fear of human interaction with them, so it really puts the emphasis on the person that works on the dairy to remain as safe as possible. You can see that there's a lane right behind me which gives you some isolation from the bulls, but you always have to be conscientious of where they are, what they're doing, and again, read their behavior. If you take a look what's right there, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bulls that are relatively close, but only one of them is posturing at the moment. And that's kind of a warning for you. And I think to keep yourself safe, you need to remember how big and strong these animals are and always be wary of their behavior. Okay, we're in the freestall section of the barn right now, and as you can see off of my right-hand shoulder, the vet's doing preg checks. And all the cows that you've got in this freestall setup, there's an alley behind us, and they're all locked up in the stanchion. Dairy cattle have a real different interaction with people than you're going to see with beef cattle. One, we don't use stanchions to feed the beef industry, but they do in the dairy industry, so an awful lot of medications, vaccinations, preg checks, all those things can be done while they've got them locked up in a stanchion, and we'll take a look at that. But a couple of things happen because they're grouped in relatively tight with their heads through a stanchion or in a lockup. There's animals that are right next to them all the time, and because they stick their heads through there multiple times a day to eat, they don't really panic by being in a lockup situation. It allows the vet to go quickly from one cow to the next to do his preg checks that he has to do. And again, if there's any other thing that they needed to do, this is an ideal situation while they're restrained to go ahead and do it. Okay, standing here in a drive-through alley which they feed out of in the middle portion of this barn, and a couple of things that are important in here as far as how it's put together and safety for the animals and the people that are concerned here. If you go back to the introduction in here, I talked about the difference in the way that livestock are put together based upon whether they happen to be ruminants and hence in nature they were prey animals instead of predatory animals. And because of that, they don't have depth perception near to the degree that we do. If you take a look down at my feet, you'll see that we've got a cattle guard that is here. Because cattle pretty much lack depth perception, as do sheep and goats, this is a barrier to them that they don't want to step over. And so it's easy because a truck can drive across this, you and I can walk across this, but they typically will not be comfortable stepping through that. And we utilize the way that they're put together to help us move them easily and keep them safe. Also, if you went back to the alleys that are off either to the right or the left side of me, you'll see that all the concrete has been grooved. And that does a couple of things, but the biggest thing is it improves the footing that the animals have got in situations that may have, water and urine and some feces collected there. It's less slippery, and if it's less slippery, the animals are less likely to get hurt, and so are the people that handle them. Okay, we're in the middle of the barn, and a couple of things are taking place, but mainly what I want you to be able to do is focus on the stanchions that are right here. And in the dairy industry, stanchions really make an awful lot of processes easier. The cows are used to being locked up in there. They can release them here anytime they want, and then they can all back away. But it's a non-panic situation for them, which is really good. As we said, it's really efficient on the vet's part to preg check in a stanchion. We'll make a comparison to that this afternoon when we look at beef handling equipment and the fact that the cattle in the beef industry only get handled typically twice a year. So for them to be in a lockup situation is not familiar to them, so their stress level rises a little bit, and we have to handle them entirely differently. and that's why we've spent as much money as we have on handling equipment for beef cattle. The gentleman that's behind me is utilizing an EID wand, of which he can pick up the transducers on each one of their ears, and it identifies who they are on his machine, how many days in milk they are, when the last time they were AI'd. And so every animal doesn't have to be gone through, and you don't have to carry a lot of paperwork with you. The vet can go ahead and preg check only the ones that need to be preg checked, not every animal that's in a lockup situation. Thank you.